Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Eight Above webinar. And this is Cinema Meet the Creator. And we have, please welcome Max Reisinger, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. I should have checked that because it's like, are you Reisinger?
Reisinger, Reisinger.
Okay, so Reese Rice, okay, got a little from Creator Camp, and Richard Rushfield, very happy to have you from the Ankler. Hopefully it's the first time of multiple times that you'll come and visit us. Um, so can someone kick off the note taker, please? Grace or Nick, because we generally don't have that. Okay, so welcome. Great to have you. And so just as a general thing, use the chat feature. Please don't use it endlessly to promote your project. If you feel inclined to say once something about your project, great, but pretty much it's a chat about this conversation. And if you want to ask questions, we'll try to get to those. We have moderators who will be adding those questions to a list of questions that we'll see on the back end. And just, generally be respectful. Generally, we've had no issue with that ever since the one time when things kind of went, crazy about a year ago. So we've been all good since then. So thank you all for your wonderful participation. So I'm just going to kick it off. And so, Max, can you kind of talk about, like what is Creator Camp and kind of maybe also introduce Two Sleepy People, the film that you Creator Camp just released?
Yeah, happy to. First off, thanks everyone for joining. This is my first webinar, so thanks for hosting, John.
Your first webinar ever?
Yeah, ever,
Oh my
ever.
God. Oh
I
my,
know.
I'm so honored. I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah, so my name is Max. My background started on YouTube when I was 15. My family moved to France for a year, and I didn't speak the language. I was thrown into a public school there, and I was like, wow, like I don't really know what to do, but I have like this like compulsion to like document this experience. And so I started doing these like mini documentary films on YouTube, and did that for about 5 years full time. Grew the channel to over 750,000 subscribers. And along the way, met a lot of other creators who were trying to make more premium content on YouTube. They wanted to make films, they wanted to make TV shows. In some cases, they were getting millions of views, but they were making like a few $100s off of their content. And we're like, okay, like this is interesting. Like there's a new wave of talent coming from the internet. But the infrastructure to help like develop this talent, to fund this talent, and to distribute in ways that are maybe more meaningful than just YouTube AdSense don't really exist. And so, what does it look like for us to build a community of this talent? And then, what does it look like to actually fund these projects, distribute it, and create maybe like a new studio model to support these folks? And that's what Creator Camp is. Two Sleepy People is our first full-length feature film that we helped produced and distributed into theaters this January. And that's what we're here to chat about today. Does that do it justice, John?
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. Can you describe a little bit of Two Sleepy People, like what the film is?
Yeah, so Two Sleepy People is a film written by the creator American Baron, and then another creator, Caroline Grossman, who goes by Caroline Constanar. They came together to both like co-write, and then he directed the film, but they both co-starred in the film as well. And the film is about two co-workers who are working at an ad agency who don't really know each other because there's just a like there's just been a merger. But every night they have the same lucid dream where they're married, but they don't realize that they're both having the same dream. But in the real world, Sid is actually like married to someone. So it kind of follows the two relationships. It's like a little bit of a psychological film. There's funny moments that feel more comedic, and then it also dives into like, deeper trauma and stuff. And so like it really gets you at your core as well. So it's a fun sort of indie film that we put together.
Cool. And just for reference, what was the budget of the film?
The budget was $100,000. We spent a bit less earlier on, but then it kind of ended up being 100 after we fixed up some things in post.
Yeah, so I think this might fall into non-D filmmaking. Um,
Yeah,
so I don't
definitely.
know whether you guys would say it's non-D. I guess in all, in a sense, it's completely non-dependent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. fully financed by us as a business. We like started as more of an events company and did a lot of commercial productions for brands looking to make commercials that are more native to social. So like we worked with a lot of that creator talent and then we just reinvested all that. So fully independent as a business.
Right, right. Cool. Then there's Courtney chiming in. Yes, totally non-D. There you go, Courtney. All right. And wave the flag here. So,
Max, can I ask what was your to the filmmakers? What was your pitch to them of how we're going to do this different and how this is going to be a different kind of model that you're pursuing here?
Yeah, great question. I think for a lot of them, the pitch was easy to some because they had no one else coming to them. So, and any sort of money is great because a lot of these folks, Baron was shoots almost everything on an iPhone. So to have any budget is like remarkable. But the pitch for us was really like, hey, we want to give you upside in these projects. We found that a lot of creators are kind of stuck in what we describe as like a brand deal loop where they have to post really consistency to get brand deals, but if they stop posting, their revenue drops pretty significantly. So there's no time period to work on a longer project or to really invest more time into something. And for us, we were able to say like, hey, we'll give you capital so that you can actually invest time in this project and we'll give you upside. And hopefully there's a case in which you can make much more money than you're making off of brand deals. And so that was the pitch that we'd help co-develop this with them.
so that does, so it does, and we'll get into this later. I think just to talk about the structure of how we're going to run this is first kind of using Two Sleepy People as a bit of a case study, and then getting into the issues of how filmmakers can become creators and creators becoming filmmakers and kind of what's involved. And as you mentioned, that kind of like this kind of maybe even hamster wheel-esque, because I've encountered many, and I've seen filmmakers encounter many hamster wheels in the filmmaking industry. They get into one loop and then it's hard, they're earning money from that, and it's hard to like break out into another loop. And it seems like creators are kind of caught in that, and it makes it hard for them to step out and become filmmakers themselves.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why we explored more of a studio model and distributor model to help support them because I think sometimes the rhetoric is like, oh, you're a creator, you can do everything yourself. You can use your whole audience, your fans, your finance, similar to maybe what like Markiplier did. But I think those are more rare cases. And often creators, especially in like the creator middle class, actually like can't don't have that much capital to fund their own project or the time or resources or to be able to like build out that team. And so yeah, spot on.
Yeah, okay. So what was the kind of distribution and marketing plan overall for the release of the film?
Yeah, so the big experiment and plan for us was to go theatrical. What we found coming from YouTube is that oftentimes creators are posting and you're going to like the bottom of the windowing process first. So you're starting with like ad supported tier. And for us, we're like, there's so much value being left on the table. And why not try to go like the most premium first? Because there are a lot of like really engaged fans who I think would show up and that crave community, they crave experiences, and they crave new types of content. And so our bet was can we go theatrically and can we go direct to Baron's audience, to our audience, and then could we also build a whole campaign that gets folks excited to go to theaters? And so that was pretty much the heart of everything we were trying to do was can we get this movie into theaters as a first-time distributor? And can we get people to show up? And
Right.
that's what we
Right.
spent the last, 6, 7, 8 months doing.
Yeah, I want to actually dive into that, but I forgot one question about the making of the film, just to step back. Did you involve Barron's and your audience in the making of the project? Or did you, and if you did, how did you do that?
Honestly, not really. I think we were doing like 10 projects at the same time. We did this like partnership with Patreon where we hosted like a film festival. For us, we're like, what does Sundance look like in the age of the internet, and how can we get like online communities and creators making stuff in person? And as part of that, we had yeah, like 8 short films and one feature, but they were all being shot at the same time. So we were just like doing all of that and planning the festival. And so I think if we were to do it again for the next projects, we definitely would include audiences earlier on, but we kind of had to retrospectively do that and then involve folks in the distribution of the project and having that be more of the marketing as opposed to getting them in from day one.
Right. So then how did you like, were you just I mean, kind of like the impression I potentially have is that you just went straight to Barron's and your audience and told them about the theatrical release. And I'm just kind of curious what else you did. How did you, like, how soon did you do that, like in advance? And, were you worried that they wouldn't show up in person? And did you have backup plans, etc.?
Yeah, it was the sort of challenging chicken and the egg process that went on for like a few months where we first went to theaters and we're like, hey, Barron has 5 million followers. Like he has a really engaged audience. And we were met with, well, where is this audience? Can you, prove that they're going to show up? And we were like, okay, how do we start to like actually understand exhibitors better and like de-risk it for them? Because as much as we feel confident about our process, they're also ultimately taking a risk on our project at the end of the day. And so that set out this campaign that we did, which was like, how do we own this audience and like, how do we actually get real data on where they are? And so we built out this website, twosleepypeople.com, where we built this interactive globe and map. And we were like, we want emails, but everyone asks for emails and it can get really annoying. So how do we actually like provide value to the audience? And so the whole campaign that we ran was like, if you gave us your name, your email, and your zip code, we would put your name in the credits of the film when it had its wide release. And so that way we're like, hey, we'll actually like get you involved. Like you can be a part of this with us, and then we'll like, give you behind the scenes and all that other stuff. But that was the only way we thought folks would actually give us their email. And we had over
Okay.
20,000 people sign up. Oh, go ahead.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then how long is that credit section? Just that, how long are your credits now? Like how much time are your credits?
It's like 5 minutes, but it goes pretty fast. It's like a lot of audiences laugh because they just see like a whole wave. It's fast enough to that it doesn't take all too long, but you can still read the names.
And
Uh,
did that make a difference with exhibitors saying we've got 15,000 people and adjoining zip codes or whatever the numbers were?
Yeah, so we used that and then we did a four city roadshow because we wanted to like do a bit of a marketing campaign, get folks excited about the film. But the big thing we heard back from exhibitors was like, what's your per screen average? What about the early premieres? And we were like, what's a per screen average? And so we were like, rented out four different theaters across the West Coast and then in New York. And then we got this like old RV in Seattle and we drove all the way down and like actually like kind of toured it like a music band. And then we sold $40,000 in tickets across those four shows. And then we are like, hey, we have, a $10,000 per screen average across four, single show times. Like there is actual demand here. And, these actually sold out in a lot of the markets. Can we like now get some show times? And then we actually had the data. And then we got 31 night single shows. And this was like November 14th. So like we wanted a much wider release, but they're like, we'll give you this to start with. And so we had that. We sold most of them. And then we're like, can we have more? But then it was December, so it was super crowded. So we had like, I think it was like 22 to 24 theaters, the same thing, single showtime. And then finally they're like, okay, like there is more demand. We continued to build that list. And then in January we had a much wider release of like I think it was 100 theaters. And then we had over 1,000 showtimes. So we actually had like a whole week of showtimes with multiple per day, as opposed to just the single showtime before. So it was a lot of like proving, and then eventually kind of getting kind of like earning it, I'd suppose.
I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like most filmmaking, like almost all filmmakers, when they're going down the road and someone says, "What's your per screen average?" The whole process just dies there, and people just say, "I can't give you that." But it's so impressive finding a way. Okay, that's the information they need, and how do we get them the thing we need? They need. How do we build this and finding ways to do that is really impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also just it speaks to like the benefits of a longer theatrical release because you can try different things, you can develop over time, and so I think that's really wonderful. So you just rented the first four theaters, right? You just four-walled them, right? And then
Yep.
did you get a booker on for the next round, for the next 11 or so
Yeah.
screens? Yeah. Okay, great. And is
Yeah.
that the same booker that then handled and they just help you expand? Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
great. Cool. Cool. So then so talk a little bit about how, so you had those email addresses and you had your online audiences. Was that the main way that you promoted those first four screenings, which I tried to get a ticket of, like the New York screening? I think I was 3 weeks in advance and I couldn't, it was sold out already. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
So is that pretty much what you went to? Is the it did show that the fan base showed up in those cities?
Definitely, yeah. I think New York was our strongest market by far, but yeah, we used a lot of that early data emails, and then also we tried to do um, a lot of organic posts. So I'd say like the whole campaign, like 99.9% was just organic marketing through Instagram or using Instagram to funnel people to email. But I'd say most of the success was actually through like email on those original premieres. And then also part of that form, we actually collected phone numbers as well, and that proved to be like really, really valuable, and in some cases, like much more than an email. We used a software called Klaviyo with a K, if anyone wants to use it. Worked great for us. But yeah, like almost everything was through Instagram for the first premieres, and then even continuing as we expanded.
Right.
Do
So
you
that was
think
so the Klaviyo is a text marketing feature, right? So that, yeah.
Yeah, same with email
do
as well.
you think because the audience was invested in this whole process from the inception there, that it made it if you had appeared and said we have a movie and it's done and just like a like most releases do, would you have been able to summon the same excitement and sort of movement for it that way?
Yeah, I think it would have been really challenging. I think for us, we'd been promoting the movie like we released it at the end of April at the Paramount Theater for our festival. And that gave us like a mini little groundswell, but we didn't have too much promotion. But then over the summer, we had probably been making videos on Instagram. If anyone wants to look them up, it's at Creator Camp on Instagram. You can go back and see like the whole campaign that we did. Also on the Too Sleepy movie Instagram account. But we've been building audience there for like over 3 months. And so by that point, people were like, I really want to see the film. And we had that like tension built up. But if we had launched that, right after April, like I think no one would have gone or we would have not had that much momentum or nowhere close to it.
And what do
Right.
you
So
think?
you go ahead, Richard.
Oh, sure. What do you think for the people signing up? What do you think was the hook? Was it they were fans of the creators, or were they indie film fans who were excited about the process, or what was it that got them interested in this?
Yeah, I think there's like maybe we could boil it down to like three things. Like one, like fans of just Baron and the cast and crew, Baron and Caroline, who just like love their work online, wanted to see like an extension of that. Like a lot of comments under Baron's Instagram videos, like, "Oh, I wish this was a movie," or "I wish you made a movie." So there's like that core audience from him. Two, I think like our audience, which like are excited in what we're building and like who are maybe creators themselves and want to one day make movies. And then three, I think like to your point, like fans of independent film or just like media in general that want fresh stories, they want new stories, they want, other things to watch in cinemas, and we're excited by new content. So I'd say it's a mix of all of them. But it started more out as like Baron's audience, and then it grew to just be like just larger consumers who just wanted a fun movie to watch. But I think starting with that like core audience early on that were like really big fans allowed us to get the momentum, which then sort of like a video game, like kept progressing level and level to eventually the wide release.
Sure.
Cool. So you'd say that then pretty much your promotion was the your online audience, organic social, email, and text. And did that change over? Did you add anything when you went wider in January into those all those extra screenings?
We had like a little bit of paid media that we put into at that point because we were like, oh my gosh, like we should actually like like the organic's been a great like beginning point, but like let's try to go even beyond our own audience. And so we had like a really small budget set aside for that. But nowhere close to like what a normal P&A would be. So I think it was still largely just organic all the way. And I think that is fine and all, but I think what we found even after the case was like, oh, we're getting messages from people a week after, 2 weeks after, 3 weeks after. They're like, oh my God, I didn't realize the movie was out that week. Like I just missed it. I didn't see it. And so I think for us it was like I think cool to see what you can do with just organic, but I think it also leaves so much more room to if you actually do like add like strategic paid media, like you can have much bigger results. And so I think while organic is great, like I think there is still merit in like traditional P&A and how that functions as well. And like actually like getting to people and reminding them that it's happening like multiple times. And I think with organic, it's hard to do that.
Yeah.
And to remind folks like the video might have gotten 1 million views like 2 months ago, but like doesn't matter
Yeah.
this week when we're in theaters.
Yeah. Do you find, like, even with the creators of your size, that in order to reach your full audience, you have to pay Meta, like otherwise, or do you feel like your messages, because a lot of filmmakers and other people that I've spoken to feel like they're throttled unless they pay. Obviously, if you're creating like someone like Baron who's creating regular content that really moves, the algorithm for Meta, that's one thing. But do you
Sure.
find that you're still not getting through to everyone unless you pay?
I think it's a mix of both, but I think you definitely are not getting to the full, follower count for sure. And I think that's more and more, reflective of how the platforms work, how short form content is working, and just pushing it to different audiences. But I think like a mix is best. Like I think if you're just doing paid media, it's really hard to get people to care. But if you're kind of doing a mix of both, where like we're able to do a lot of retargeting with warm audiences who'd interacted before, and we could say like, hey, with the pixel, we know someone's actually visited our site, they are interested in this, and we can target them super precisely because we have so much more data from an organic audience. Even if it's not all of Barron's audience, it's still new people that we've been reaching and who are
Yeah.
engaged with the product.
All right, so I want to add, so what did you spend on paid media?
I think it was like $30,000.
Oh, that's not a bad for most independent filmmakers. That's a pretty, decent paid ad budget.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No,
yeah.
it's definitely a good amount.
Yeah. And then do you have any data from that? Like what was your cost per click, that you just, if you have that off the top of your head, I'm just kind of curious, like how well it performed.
I don't remember. I think some were like pretty good, like maybe 50 cents or so. In some cases, even like 20 with some of the campaigns.
Right.
But I have to look back at all of it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Like that's a decent sized paid ad budget. And do
Yeah.
you just overall, you felt that it really helped fill those theaters in January? Did you really felt that that's what contributed, like taking advantage of boosting your organic through paid is what really pushed audiences out to those theaters?
Yeah, I think where we found it challenging is that like there's core markets that we were, like really strong in. But most of our theaters were with Regal, and there was a lot of theaters that they gave us where our audience just wasn't at all. And we were like, we
Yeah.
don't want like empty theaters. And so I think it helped us like reach people in those areas that we just can't reach organically or didn't have control over.
Right.
We found that to be pretty effective in folks who had no idea really like who even Baron was. We're just interested in the marketing of the film itself. So we found it to be like pretty successful there.
So did you do anything to, once you had these audiences showing up, especially the ones that didn't know Baron, did you do anything to try to collect those audiences, like even something like QR code on screen at the end, or, do any kind of like audience? I'm just really,
Yeah,
I know it's a little, I guess it's a twofold question. One is, what did you do when you guys were there in person?
yeah.
And then what did you do when you weren't there in person?
Yeah. In person, we definitely did that, and like we pushed folks to like Letterbox, for example. But the in person, we did all the ticketing through Luma, and so we're able to collect all their emails and data and phone numbers. But then for the wide release, we kind of debated it internally of what we wanted to do. Like for the first two releases, we had more of the like, here's the story of the film and what we're trying to do, like tell your friends sort of messaging. And then the wider release, that's when we integrated all the names into it. And so we told the theaters that the film was 93 minutes. And so we had to compress all of it because we had to add in all the names. And so we had to cut a lot of that messaging to make all the names fit.
Uh,
So that was a bit of a blunder on our part, I think, because we could have used that real estate more effectively, but it was such a scramble to like get it all in time that we're like, oh, like at least we just got the names into the film. But I think in retrospect, I think we could have done something better there and then gotten folks more engaged or just talking about it and kind of creating that flywheel. But that was something that, yeah, I think could have been done better, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just curious. I mean, it is hard, like, because I'm a huge fan of pushing filmmakers to collect data on
Oh
their
yeah.
audiences as much
Yeah.
as possible. But if you're not there, it's really like, what do what do you do? Like from, even from thinking of, hiring people like on off Fiverr to show up at the theater with clipboards, just like
Yeah.
whatever you can possibly do, because that it's interesting to hear from a creator who's created audience on Instagram and YouTube talking about how valuable email addresses and phone numbers are to directly connect
100%.
with your audience. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
What
uh,
is the primary place where you collect people's information? Is it your Instagram or your website, or what is the place that you're pushing people towards the most to sign up?
Yeah, we funneled people to the website of the movie, twosleepypeople.com. And so all the Instagram content was, forwarded to our bio. And then we did some many chat features, which also sent people the link to the movie to sign up there as well. But yeah, everything was collected through the website that we built.
In those
right.
early screenings, if I said to you, give me a list of everybody who was at them, what percent of them do you think what percent of the attendees do you think you could list?
100%.
Right.
We have everyone, and even some of the folks who didn't attend but still bought a ticket. We still have their info.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that should hopefully get fixed, at least in the independent art house space. It's probably going to be harder with Regal, where there's some sort of overall repair to the ticketing service of independent theaters, because so that you can use the pixel from Meta ad face social advertising to track whether sales happen. That generally doesn't exist except for a couple theaters in the country. Sean's clapping that, yes. And then B, having an opt-in for people like who are buying tickets. Do you want to hear from this filmmaker? I mean, that doesn't
Yeah.
even exist in American cinema, having this kind of disconnect with the audience and having where filmmakers can't connect with audiences unless they're there with clipboards or QR code is just it's a it's contributing to the dysfunction of our system, and somehow this has to get fixed. So anyway, just I'll get off my soapbox, but there's all this data, all these people going to movies. People are going to movies more than ever, and at least especially for independent films, and no one's collecting that data and connecting with those audiences except for a few intrepid filmmakers who are there with clipboards at every screening. So, all right. Okay, moving on from that. So what's the future plans for the release of the film?
Yeah, so the interesting thing with getting the data is seeing that over half of our audience is actually overseas, and most of that being in Europe and the UK. So after the I guess it's been like the last few months. Since that, we've been trying to pitch, going to theaters directly, and that was super challenging. And so I ended up going out to Berlin and EFM to like meet with actual distributors there.
Hmm.
So we aren't announcing anything publicly yet, but very soon there will be news about someone that we're partnering with to help us go overseas. And that's the next big push through the summer is that. And then now we're exploring different streaming things or TVOD or building our own platform and kind of exploring all the options. But part of that is kind of figuring out the theatrical side and the windowing process is different for France, for example. If we were there's like I think it's what like one year block where we can't go on streaming afterwards. So figuring out like is it a deal with global rights? Well, then that kind of triggers this and that. So it's a lot of education and making sure that we're not crossing anything on the territory side.
Yeah. Well, I would strongly, especially since, if you have like a devoted fan base like this, TVOD is where you can really collect audience data,
Yeah.
and doing it independently, not doing it through Amazon or any large platform, but doing it independently, obviously that's where you're really going to pick up, your audience data, which I would highly recommend you guys do before any sort of streaming play where you're not going to, unless there's a huge, giant chunk of change, especially since you guys are so focused on developing audience that
Yeah.
it seems like doing something to do that prior to any sort of quote unquote streaming, I would
Yeah.
highly recommend. Yeah. And then I'm a big fan of merch, as anyone who's on these webinars knows. You guys must have done a merch play. Please say yes.
We did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We did that during the tour, but we spent probably like I think we way overestimated how many people would actually buy merch for the film.
Really?
So we actually lost money on merch.
Wow.
Funny enough, and ended up just using it as a tool where we would go to the screenings afterwards and just give it out for free to folks. But
Really? That's with a fan base like that, I would have thought that they would have. Why do you, I mean, how much, like how many, what did you create? So just that. What,
We had hoodies, we had t-shirts, we had posters. Like we thought folks would be pretty rabid for it, but I think like we found out that a lot of these folks don't have as much spending power as we thought.
mm,
And our fans, but not like that bought in. I think that's the difference between like certain creators as well. Like um someone like Baron, even though he has 5 million followers across a TikTok and Instagram, people might really love and appreciate his work, but they might not be fans of him parasocially to the degree in which they're willing to pay, X amount of dollars for a hoodie in the same way like my sister spends hundreds of dollars on, Louis Tomlinson merch because she just loves him. I think that's what we found with Baron is like his audience is really interested in his work, but they're not necessarily like fans of him in that like way where they're like, let me spend all this money because I love you. Um,
thing?
and also maybe there's other factors at play where like the movie was for the merch. It wasn't like Baron Ryan merch. So a lot of factors at play, but yeah, that was an interesting one.
Do you sell the merch from the website or strictly deal with it? So you're at least selling it that way. Yeah, I
Yeah.
always recommend to start small with merch and just test it and
Yeah.
just, yeah. So, and see what's working and not working and see what works for your audience. Yeah, yeah. No, I
Yeah, I
get it.
definitely test, 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 test. And for us, we're working on like a smaller timeline. We just needed stuff for the tour, so we're like, just get it all done and go and have extras, and then we had a lot more extras. So, um, yeah, I'd start small. I wouldn't say like don't do merch, but figure out, how to do merch strategically, especially on like the logistics side, because it ends up eating a lot of time. And that's somewhere where our team was like spending a bunch of time shipping orders, and we are like, is the money really making the difference at this point, or is that time maybe better spent on marketing where we have maybe a greater return? Actually,
How were you able to offer it to people, and was it just on the website, or were there any ways at the theaters to sell it, or how?
yeah, so we offered it at the tour in the four stops across all those cities, and then we also sold it online afterwards.
Hmm.
Some theaters were open to putting it in, but for us, it wasn't worth it financially to ship it all to them and take on that risk and split the revenue because at that point, like it would have been marginal, and so we actually opted out of partnering with theaters on merch for this go around. Um, but I think it's something we would probably explore in the future. But for this one, we just had such a small team where we're like, it's at a certain point, like we could, but like we can't even afford to do this and to take that risk.
Yeah. So then, what was the total revenue from the theatrical so far?
So when we first premiered it, we did our own like fest. So like there's a world in which you can count that as premiere because that was revenue
Yeah.
from that. So like with that, we sold $150,000 in tickets. And then the fall to the January release is like $275,000 all together.
Oh, so you're like at 450 or 475. And so that's gross. And so, but in the first part, the 150, you're keeping because you four-walled, you're keeping all of that gross. You're just deducting the theater, which
Yep.
is smart. If you know you have that rabid audience, it does, I think, make sense to four-wall because
Yeah.
then you're keeping all the revenue. But then on the second batch of money, the 250 gross, you're getting like somewhere between 40 and 50%. 35 to 50% somewhere in there of that money coming back to you.
Yep. It was 50-50 split with almost all the theaters that we worked with.
Hmm.
I don't even know if I should be saying this or if I'm allowed to, but yeah, with AMC it was 70-30, 70 in their favor. They
Right.
played a lot harder ball with us, but everyone else was like really, really eager to explore like fair terms.
Yeah, that's why I was saying it's like somewhere around 40% if you average it out, because some theaters are,
Yeah.
are only going to give you 30, some will be, 50-50. So,
Mhm.
yeah. So,
Do you have any sense if you had flexibility on ticket pricing, how that if you could have done $5 screenings or $3 screenings or because you talked about the
Yeah.
your fans having limited resources. Would that have had an impact?
I think so, and it's something we wanted to do, like especially with some of the independents. But funny enough, we thought that getting into the larger chains would be the most difficult part. Like, could we even get into an AMC or a Regal or a Cinemark or a Draft House? And we ended up getting to all of them, but the hardest part was actually getting into independents. Like, we couldn't get into like any of them that we wanted because a lot of them were like, "Hey, we're booked up for the next few months," or we have an exclusive screen here, and we're playing Zootopia at 9 p.m., but sorry, we can't play your film. Um, and we were hoping that we could cut some of those deals with independents, but I think that for sure would have helped with folks. And then also I think just getting better locations would have made the biggest difference by far. And I think that was the hardest thing with theaters is like they were able to give us theaters, but oftentimes fans were driving like an hour from where they live, or in some cases like multiple hours. And we actually went, our wider release was the week of the great snowstorm that we had. So like half of
Oh,
our
wow.
theaters were actually like shut down. So like, um, and a lot of fans were like, I drove through a snowstorm to go see it. So I think that actually was like the biggest thing because in LA, like the best theater we had was in like Pasadena. Like we weren't able to get anything in West Hollywood, Santa Monica. Like
Oh,
like
wow.
it was super challenging to get anything. And so I think that was the hardest thing is like folks like I have work and when I get off work, like I have to drive like an hour and a half with traffic. I don't even think I can go see the movie. And so that um was I think yeah, just the most frustrating part.
Right. Well, next time we should talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll get you into the art houses. So,
Yeah.
but and then the last thing about the release, I'm just looking at the questions from the audience here in the ones we didn't cover. And one thing I was going to ask you, how did you eventize those first four screenings? Like, what did you do to make those special? And then did you eventize any of the later ones as well? And how did you do that?
Yeah. So like the first one we literally just made it into like a festival itself. Like we had a lot of live musical performances. We had speakers, like Jack
Cool.
Conti from Patreon came out. We had other folks in the space like Yes Theory who are big YouTubers. We had Ken Parsons there who's doing the Backrooms film with A24 and then Wesley Wang as well. So we're trying to bring like together internet native filmmakers to make it more valuable and experience. And then for the actual roadshow itself, that was slightly eventized, but like I think we could have done more to be honest. It really just functioned as like here's the movie premiere, afterwards Q&A, get to meet other creators. We had like an open red carpet. We had the guy who scored the movie is like this like piano prodigy, and he has this like old converted bus where half of the bus is cut off, and he has a piano on the back of the bus. And so as people were walking out, he was like playing music from the actual film. So that was
That's
pretty cool.
amazing.
But I think there's more we could have done. But even then, for fans, just to be able to meet Baron and Caroline and the cast and crew and take photos was like enticing enough to go. But I think there's more interesting ways to eventize it at scale, or even like that's where I think there's room and opportunity. Like as we went into the wider releases, we were like really thinking like how do we eventize those even? Because just saying like go to the movie theaters isn't enough nowadays. And so I think like there's a lot of space and just room to innovate at that scale where like you can't maybe be there, but how do you still like make it interesting for folks to show up?
Yeah, and what are do you have some thoughts around that you want to share, or are you holding on to those?
No, I mean, I'm here to open source and share everything. I think like all ships rise together. But that was like the hope with like the name and the credits. Like seeing your name is an experience, but I think some folks I know have like um gotten like I think fans or audience members to like hide things under like seats, which is kind of tricky to do logistically. I don't know how they did that, or I think one movie I heard about they like gave away free tickets to like Mexico because the film was shot in Mexico. So I think like leaving Easter eggs is interesting. And then another thing we thought about was like, could we organize like after parties for each of the showings in like some of the major cities and allow fans to self organize or like have a meeting place to like actually discuss afterwards and meet people. Because I think a lot of folks like actually want community and want to meet other people, but it's kind of
Yeah.
awkward after you leave the theater like, hey, like what's going on? So that's something that we wanted to do, but just didn't have the bandwidth to. But I think there's something interesting about that.
Yeah, cool. Great. Um, Richard, do you have any other questions on the case study aspect of this?
Yeah, so what's the biggest thing you would do different if you could
Hmm,
do
great
something?
question.
What's your
I think getting more audience data earlier on, like we only thought of the email stuff like later on, or like really didn't build out that strategy until later until we like had to. I think like um and then also like reaching out to exhibitors much earlier, like the independents and folks and just letting them know that we're interested. I think having to like do things last minute was tricky. Because I think those are like the biggest friction points, or like where the theaters actually are, and then like getting data earlier on of like knowing that there's people in these places. Um, but and then also just raising more P&A. Like if we were able to do that, I think it just would have helped. And then like also using the early data momentum to then go to folks and like keep reaching out to them and informing them like, hey, the film is growing and like doing what we can independently, but then using that, to leverage still going out to folks. I think we had the mentality like, let's just do it all ourselves. But I think if we did have, a bit of money earlier on, it would have helped and gone a long way.
Yeah,
But not
and
everyone can, but I think we could have like actually made more of an effort too. And I think having a bit more momentum ourselves like could actually have translated to something.
Knowing what you know, what you've been through, when you start with filmmakers now, when you have your first meeting with them,
Yeah.
what do you tell them to be prepared for? What do you tell them like this is what you're going to need to do. You may not like this, but
Yeah.
this is what's coming.
The biggest thing is like the movie is the easy part, which sounds ridiculous to say, but like once the movie's done, like you're just getting started. And I think that was the biggest shock for both us as a team and for Baron and Caroline as well. And that like the marketing is actually like super, super challenging and it just goes on and on and on, especially if you're doing it independently. Like this is like multiple months of your life and like it's really challenging to do this work. Um, and so I think like making a movie is an incredible accomplishment. But figuring out how to make money back from the movie is a whole nother feat. And so I think that's the biggest expectation setting is like making it is just a start. And there's a whole journey we're gonna have to go on afterwards together to actually get it out into the world.
yeah. Yeah, I've always said distribution is easy, marketing is hard, and then I think it was about at the Slam Dance Market Monday, I said actually making a film is easy. Getting people to want to watch it is that's the toughest thing. And sorry to all the filmmakers who are slaving through films. I know it's hard,
Yeah,
but just it's good to hear from Max. You know, especially to hear from a creator who's already developed audience to say that that's also the hardest part. It's just, I guess, in a sense, it validates like all the filmmakers who are, have to realize they have to struggle through the marketing and distribution as well.
yeah. It's super challenging. Even though you are a creator, or Baron had millions of followers, like I think that actually translated much less than we actually thought. And like we had to learn to be creators as a film studio. And I think um hopefully that's encouraging to folks out there where like I think it can be defeating to see like a Markiplier and being like, well, great, I don't have, 40 million subscribers. What do I do? I think most of the work was actually like us as a distributor and starting things without even an audience. So yeah, it's challenging.
Yeah. Um, so moving on to the kind of section of how filmmakers can take lessons from what you're doing and what creators are doing. I guess just the most obvious question is, and I know this is broad and we'll break it down, but how do you feel that filmmakers can maybe start to create audiences similar to how creators? I mean, obviously they're probably not going to, get 5 million across TikTok and Instagram like Baron, but in a sense, potentially everything helps, or how do you get to some sort of critical mass that you feel like it might be helpful and techniques that filmmakers, et cetera, just opening up. It's an opening question into this realm.
Yeah, I think at least what I've seen, like and like a lot of the talent that we work with, you kind of have to think both as a actual like producer of the content and a marketer at the same time. And that's the interesting thing that we're seeing about digital talent, where you start on a YouTube, where like you get that real-time feedback pretty fast. Like, are people watching it or are they not? Am I growing my audience and people are continuing to like it or are they not? And I think maybe traditionally like indie filmmaking is I'm just going to make something and then hopefully someone, buys it and then they distribute it and they figure it out. And I think sort of closing that gap or like starting to integrate that from day one is I think the biggest shift. And then it just becomes like the movie is one story, but then what is the story about the movie and why people should care? And I think getting good at telling two stories at the same time is really the skill to develop. And then, all the things that you speak about in terms of developing audience, owning audience, really just helps build momentum for the project.
Right, right. And then, so because my understanding is like, to be a creator and to develop an audience, you guys are posting multiple times a week. It's that, or like, what do you feel is necessary at the minimum of kind of
Sure.
creating content and engaging audiences to try to build audiences on social outside of the film itself?
Yeah. Honestly, I've seen like everything all across the board work. Like there's some creators we know that post like once a month on YouTube. It's like a 10 to 15-minute video.
Hmm.
And, like that works and they get couple 100,000 views. Some folks are posting every day. I think that's like it's tricky because there's so much advice out there on like how often to post. And even our own posting strategy would change all the time depending on like sometimes you kind of need frequency to experiment early on, but then you find something and you want to like really develop that craft, and it might take more time to develop. But I think there's no right cadence, but I think especially on short form, I think that's the easiest and more accessible. And I think, you can put out more stuff earlier on. It just depends on the type of content. Like there's so many different variables, but I think um, it's maybe easier to post with more frequency when you're working on a larger project in a lower fidelity way. But I think what we've seen is like a lot of depth with audiences tends to be much longer work that is maybe not posted as frequently. But I think it's hard to like have one specific thing because there's so many contradictions and so many different ways to build audience. I think that's the fun part is that there is no right way and like there's so many different audiences out there for different things and like you can reinvent, that or make something entirely new that people didn't know before. But I think yeah, honestly, like it's evolving in real time.
Right. So what would you if the filmmakers like curious in this realm and what would be your advice to them? Like, do you have tips for people who are like, thinking of developing an online audience for themselves, to support their work as filmmakers? Like do you have some suggestions for people just from all your years of experience doing this?
I'd say the biggest thing is like finding a group of people to do it with or to get more support because I think it can easily become like you're doing everything by yourself. And I think that's why we wanted to support Baron is like, if it's just on him to promote it, that's like super challenging. And I think finding another way to get folks involved and giving them upside in the project as well is I think like probably the best way to diversify just time and effort. But yeah, I think community is probably the best way because I think the folks who are just doing it by themselves like burn out really fast. And I think that's like the biggest um, pitfall is just burning out because it is really challenging to do this type of work. And so as we like found more folks who just wanted to help, it felt easier and easier to keep going.
Interesting. What do you think, what do you feel traditional filmmakers misunderstand about the creator economy and creators' work in general?
Yeah. I think there's like different types of creators too. Like I think what we're trying to really develop is the type of creator that is like really similar to a filmmaker. They just grew up posting things on the internet and they are maybe more behind the camera than like an influencer where I think a lot of folks think of like a Logan Paul or like, more of like a personality influencer. And so I think there's like a lot more commonalities between the two. And I think if you are a traditional filmmaker looking to market your film or use social media as a tool, like you are a creator, like everyone is a creator. I think we're just using different tools, and maybe that shapes the way that we think about content and audiences and that those relationships. But I think there's a lot to learn from both sides. And I think more creators are wanting to learn from traditional filmmakers and develop more of their craft and be educated, and like vice versa. So I think yeah, there's more similarities I think to explore on both sides.
Right. And one thing that people have recommended, to talk about, and, to build an audience is talk about the process of filmmaking. And, Stephanie Paris sent an advanced question saying, how do you recommend building a larger following and more engagement while also maintaining some mystique about the film?
Yeah. I think we kind of had this with our project because we were trying to hide more things about the film earlier on because we weren't sure like what people would resonate with and what would give away like bigger things about the film. Um, and so that's where we resorted to talking more about like the ethos of the film itself and what we hoped it could mean or placing it in context of culture, like trying to make it more relevant. And so that's where we made content talking about the current, studio landscape and like, how the industry was looking and what our film could do and how that fits into the system or what we were trying to do differently. And so a lot of folks got engaged just because they're like, oh, like I'm tired of seeing sequels, or why am I seeing sequels? So we had a lot of educational content as well that we were hoping would speak to the target demographic of the film. And so, a lot of our audience is like, I'm tired of seeing the reboots. And so we're explaining, well, here's why you do see the reboots. Here's how the industry works. And then here's maybe a potential solution to that, or here's what we're trying to do and like help us, do that. And so I think it depends on the audience of the film, and then you can educate them and entertain them. Like someone I spoke to recently was like, if you're not educating your audience or entertaining them, like they're not going to care. And so I think kind of finding ways to reverse engineer that target demographic is probably the best way to do it, where you don't have to mention the film or give it away, but placing it in that context is can work and worked for us.
Yeah. I think a related question is that a lot of filmmakers, and just maybe this is my own opinion because it pertains to myself, are kind of like shy, voyeuristic, people. And that's kind of how you get into film, is because you're kind of watching other people and you're watching other stories. So a lot of filmmakers might be a little hesitant, or don't feel like they have the skill set to be on camera in a sense.
Yeah,
And then what would you potentially suggest to those people, which I feel is, not all you filmmakers out there, but I think
sure.
there's a good section, of filmmakers that are more, comfortable, obviously comfortable behind the camera than in front of the camera.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because I think there's a lot of rhetoric now about like be a creator. Everyone needs to be a creator, and oftentimes it's like, well, I don't want to be a creator. I don't know how to put myself out there. That's very scary and daunting, and doesn't feel natural to me. Or I don't want to do that. And I think I get that. Like I've seen some creators who are have created like animated figures, and they use a muffled like different voice tuner, and like they have this little character that's talking about the project that they're doing. So I think there's a lot of ways you can get creative with it. Or also like get your cast involved. Like if you don't want to be the creator, cast use your actors. I'm sure they like, being on camera. So like I think there's other folks that you can string together that can help market the project, and it doesn't just have to be like talking head or talking face. So I think there are, different ways, but at the end of the day, like um it's a it is a valuable tool. Like I was super introverted. Like I hated being on camera earlier on, but I'm like, if I really do want people to care, like I'm gonna have to work through that. And so up to you at the end of the day. But yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I
Part of,
agree. I'm similar. It took me a long time to like get to the point where I'm very comfortable doing this, for instance. Richard, what were you were gonna ask
I'll
something?
say about that, I tell people going into like in all this space, whether in journalism or independent films, like you more or less don't have agents. So you've got to be your agent, or else you don't have an agent, or else there is no agent, and that's just the price of admission. But I wanted to ask beyond that, how do festivals fit into your strategy and thinking?
Good question. Earlier on, we didn't really consider them as part of the strategy because we had an audience that we felt confident in, and so our thought was like, what is the purpose of a festival serve in our case, if we're actually starting with distribution in some capacity, and we wanted to like keep the timeline moving faster. And so for us, we didn't want to wait, maybe a year or sometimes years, to go through festivals and kind of waiting for that permission. The whole test was like, let's build that demand ourselves. And so I think we there's pros and cons to that, right? Like, I think proving the legitimacy of the film and the quality of the film was challenging, where some distributors, especially in Europe, were like, well, what festivals did you get into? And if we didn't get into festivals, they're like, well, how do we know it's good? And some of the exhibitors really rely on those more traditional, stamps or badges and don't care about us having followers. And so I think we ran into that friction. But I think more and more exhibitors are receptive to this, and I think with like Iron Lung, for example, like I think it's shifting rapidly. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't say we'd count them out entirely. I think it's still really powerful to like have an audience people of people there who really care about film and appreciate it. Um, but I think it's kind of how we think about it is it's a nice to have and like a nice bonus, but we don't want to rely on it, I think at its core.
Mhm.
And once you go into festivals, how do you think about the possibility of acquisition and how that changes?
Yeah, I mean it's certainly different just because we've been trying to distribute everything ourselves and like actually act as that distributor who would be, acquiring projects or distributing them. But it's not something like we're completely opposed to. Like there are some distributors who we've spoken to who, we can really leverage the network that they have or just like, the ability to distribute at a much wider scale. So we're not like anti-distributor or anti-partnering with distributors. Um, just earlier on, like they they wouldn't care about us or know about us, and like we just had to kind of do it ourselves. But it's not something we're like opposed to, I'd say.
Mhm. Right. I guess one, this is an early question, a pre-asked question from Masha Dusto. Oh, I can't pronounce the last name. Sorry, Masha. How can producers involve creators into filmmaking at an earlier stage? So instead of becoming a creator yourself, how do you engage other creators, not for promo, but to give input on the film? Potentially, I'll extend the question possibly to act, to collaborate,
Yeah,
etc. Do you have suggestions for that?
yeah, like reach out to them. I think a lot of creators want to get involved in projects, especially creators who want to act in projects. There's a lot of great comedian talent out there that really want to be in things that are in traditional film and TV. And I think like yeah, there's a lot of demand from the creators that we speak to. And I think it's just about finding ways to make it valuable for them in their time, and it might look like giving them upside in the project. And things like that. But I'd say that there's a lot of eager folks out there who want to be in these films.
Right, right. So, yeah, talk a little bit more about the issues that creators have kind of monetizing in the creator space. Like you touched upon that earlier on, which is when you wanted to invert the windowing strategy that's presented to creators, and can you just talk a little bit about that? And because it's not, everyone thinks, oh, people are making millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars being creators. But I
Yeah,
think it's a really tough racket, and you're kind of at the whim of these platforms that are changing, algorithms, et cetera.
yeah, yeah. I think like in the best case, you can be making all that money, but I think a lot of creators, aren't or are struggling to figure out how to make money, or to your point, are at the mercy of the algorithm. And I think it depends on which platform. Like a lot of my background was on YouTube, so that's what I'm most familiar with, or where I spent most of my time. And I'd say like 90% of my income came from brand partnerships. So working with like a Grammarly or a Samsung, like some of those larger brands. And maybe like 10% was like just AdSense from my videos. And then some was like merchandising. But I think what we've seen in maybe the past few years is like creators wanting to both just like own the audience, but then also have like more upside in the business that they're building. And I think when it's just reliant on ads, like it's really challenging because you're, sort of at mercy of the ecosystem or market. But I think like, seeing the rise of like Mr. Beast launches his businesses, or Emma Chamberlain launched Chamberlain Coffee, or Logan Paul with Prime, or like all the way down to smaller creators starting matcha brands, like all sorts of things. Creators actually have upside in the products that they're selling. So it's their product that they're selling versus someone else's. And what we think about in this next wave is like, um, those are more business focused, like projects. But what about like the media side? And could media be a product? Could IP be a product? And could that be something to monetize that creators have upside in? And so that was really the pitch, kind of going back to your first question, of us going to creators is saying like, hey, like, we could help you develop this IP, and that could actually have a lot more value, and we can help monetize it in a lot of different ways. And I think a lot of creators don't really think about their media in that way. It's just media, or it's getting commoditized on YouTube. And there's, I think, a lot of social media platforms like just devalue media, and it's really challenging to make money from it. And so that's again why we went to theaters. And like, going to theaters and proving that value then gives you leverage if you do want to sell to a streamer or do your own TVOD, XYZ. Um, and then I think social media can maybe serve more as like a marketing place or a place to build community, and then you can send them to other places where you can actually make a lot more upside. So that's kind of what we're trying to build because we see that as like largely like just like territory that hasn't been like explored at scale yet. Um, does that answer your question? I know
Yeah,
a
yeah. I'm
lot
kind of
of places.
curious. How do you so you're like a studio in a sense, and you know
Yeah,
when you
in a
start
way, yeah,
when you
yeah.
start saying we're developing IP and we're developing, and it's like, which is, smart, uh, how are you structured in a sense, and how do you, I guess, for everyone attending, how do people submit to you in a sense? How do you get involved in projects?
Yeah, so yeah, I think like we are definitely like modeled after a studio in that like pure business model sense. Like what we looked to earlier on is like how Y Combinator functions in the startup space, and like they're like one of the early incubators. Which did Ankler go through that? Maybe.
We
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
We
yeah.
are grad alumni.
Yeah, yeah. I think they did really incredible work for the space. And, I think what's exciting about that model is like you're able to take a lot more bets at scale, and then the ones that pay off sort of pay for the whole thing, but you don't need everything to work. And so you can take a lot more risks. And I think for us, like that felt really in line with like the internet and us being able to say, like, hey, we can say yes to crazy things where I think media right now is moving more towards consolidation and de-risking things. And I think that's where you end up with the sequels and adding in actors. And that's fine, like that works. But I think there's also appetite for different things, and different, more ambitious content. And so for us, I think as media gets more economical to produce, and I think what creators are already producing, like a lot of times is not super capital intensive and it's still really engaging. I think it's a world in which we could say like, hey, we want to fund 1,000 movies a year, but they're, at $100,000 versus $100 million movie. That's sort of the way that we're thinking about it. And then in terms of like getting involved with us right now, a lot of it is just us like sourcing people and reaching out and finding, and like some people sending us emails and, just getting to know folks. But we don't have like a formalized like pitch place at the moment, just since we're really earlier on in our development. But I recommend folks getting involved if they have a project, shoot us an email. It's on our website. Happy
Tell
to.
you one thing about the Y Combinator model that might apply. So a big part of it is they're making all these bets. There's 400 people, 400 companies per class, with the knowledge that half of them will fail very quickly, like within 6 months. But they're looking for talented people from those ones that fail to give jobs with the ones that are successful. So it's very much a talent a, a talent agency within that world. So something to keep in mind
Yeah.
as
No, no, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you're spot on there. That's like when we first set out to do our first cohort, we did like the short films, which is kind of how we thought about pre-seed talent. So like we see someone with potential on the internet, but they don't have any capital to like actually do like a first project with the crew. So we gave out like ten to $20,000 investments to these first folks. And then if those projects sort of met the standard, we'd then reinvest and then develop it further. And then in some cases, the folks that maybe weren't quite ready to advance, they actually did end up working on the movie itself. And so the talent did actually end up funneling. And we're like, oh, maybe you aren't like a great director quite yet, but you're a fantastic DP. And like that's a space to keep developing your talent. So like I think it's really in line with what you just said there, Richard.
yeah,
That's
that's
interesting.
create a great ecosystem and community there.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right, another audience question. What is the recommendation for posting on a specific account versus personal accounts, or use both? So I guess a project specific account. So that's when and I did want to follow up when you mentioned that you not only have Barron's accounts and your accounts, but then you created accounts for the film, and then, well, I guess you created an account for Creator Camp as well. So how do you balance those, that involvement in those, and how do you, once you develop, I guess, a related question, if you're developing this audience for Two Sleepy People, how do you get that audience back to the original audience in a sense?
Yeah, yeah, a lot of accounts. Kind of how we thought about it was just like more of a traditional funnel, right? Like I think both Baron's account and our Creator Camp account sort of served as more top of funnel, just like interest. And then the thought is like folks who want to learn more about the film or like are curious and engaged can go to the actual like film Instagram account, and that's where we can have a lot more content that is just film specific. So a lot of interviews, content related, maybe clips, XYZ, who wanted to go down that rabbit hole. Um, but we didn't want to like flood our feed with like a bunch of clips from Two Sleepy People. Same with Baron, like we wanted to protect them as well. So that's kind of how we thought about it, is like building a more dedicated channel for the fans who want to get go really deep, but then still at every level we still we're sending folks to the website to like own that audience. Um, but I think the film page itself took a while to get off the ground, but I think in the end made it really valuable when we wanted to promote things or go heavier. Like we knew that they were there for the film and they cared about it, and so maybe for Baron, like a lot of his audience can't actually watch the film or weren't in places where they could see it in theaters. But if he keeps posting about it over and over, like you're gonna have fatigue with the rest of your audience, and so there's something to also like consider as well, or some conversations that we had where he's like, "Dang, like probably 95% of people can't even watch this, and I'm continuing to promote. Like I got to be careful with that audience relationship as well, or they're gonna get tired of this." And so I think that's just something to weigh in.
Right. Um, and then I guess kind of related to this, I guess Joy has a question about posting different types of themes. Like if you have, multiple audiences that you're potentially posting to, how do you kind of balance that as well? I guess it's not so much in your case because it's a very, it's a romantic comedy. So it's kind of like you're kind of staying within that lane, but wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Um, Yeah, I mean, we experimented with a lot of different types of content and different themes and all sorts of things. Like my best recommendation, I guess, would be like just like go see what other movie pages are doing and see what's working and what's not. And then like I think for us, we're like, how do we just make it more interesting and feel like more human and more relatable? Like I think oftentimes you see just actors in like a movie chair and it's like 8K quality and they're asking a very scripted question and it seems like the actor doesn't want to be there. And we're like, okay, how do we make it more personal? How do we shake it up? So like we just did funny things. Like we had Baron, we this like old our office is an old Alamo Draft House HQ, so they just have random things everywhere, but they have like a confession booth in the basement. So we put Baron in the confession booth and had him read letterbox reviews that we airdropped to him. So just like funny things like that. And I think a lot of like that just comes down to just marketing, honestly, and just like thinking through what people actually care about. But a lot of it was like grounded in like contrast to what we were seeing in the space, because it can be hard to be like, I just am coming up with an interesting idea. Um, so we spent a lot of time studying what other movies were doing and what was and what wasn't working.
Yeah. So with this long theatrical, and if you just what you said about 95% of Barron's audience can't see the film yet, and you're holding it back from like wide availability while you explore this European theatrical, like how are fans relating to that? And are some of the fans like annoyed that they can't see it? Like are they being patient or how does that because this comes up in windowing, like especially thinking of as people explore these long windows, these long theatrical or event theatricals, I call them windows, how do you manage that audience desire, expectation, and then thoughts of reigniting it later in a sense?
Yeah, I think the honest answer is like, I don't know yet. I think we're still in real time of figuring that out. We get a lot of comments, and since day one, I've gotten comments like, come to India, come to Kazakhstan, come to Germany, like everywhere. And like, I think that we can't please everyone. We want to play it in as many places as possible. But I think that's like a big thing that we're thinking through is like, how do you not just beat audiences over the head too much and create that fatigue? Um, and like how do you not alienate the majority of your audience while still pushing really hard? And like I honestly don't know. I think we did end up like um alienating a lot of Baron's audience. His engagement went down a lot. I think there's a lot of things we could have done better there in retrospect.
Mm.
And I think shifting some of the marketing to still be generally like appealing to anyone, even if they can't watch the movie, and then like really thinking through the funnel with maybe more consideration and like where there is more of that opt-in interest where you can then really push harder on email when people are a lot more committed to seeing it, or we know that they're in a location where they could see it, like pushing heavier on those places. So that's something we tried to do as the film went on, where we moved maybe further away, or we're trying to move further away from Baron, doing like, hey, the movie's out in theaters now, and trying to, make more interactive content that regardless of if you could see it or not, it would still be engaging. But that was like a struggle for us, I think.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Did you think of doing like after it played in the United States theatrically, kind of like doing where audiences could create their own screenings, like using Kinema or Gather or Eventive or something like that? And then just like within before you go theatrical overseas, but just keep it within that market, kind of like let audiences create their own screenings in a sense.
Yeah, we definitely explored those. But I think it came down to like bandwidth from our own team, and then also just like um, how much marginal money does it make for us compared to then just focusing on international, given that like, the actual like in theaters um, gave us most of like the juice that we could squeeze. Um, but I think those were definitely like more appealing from the sense of like, hey, you can own your audience, you can get the emails. I think that's like super appealing about those platforms. And I think if we maybe had less momentum earlier on, or if you don't have a large audience, I think those are like great options and paths to go down for folks. Um, but I think for us, what we learned is like there's so many things we want to do, but like the whole distribution process ended up being like killing our darlings. And like there's a lot of, oh, I wish we could, but we can't. And getting better at just letting some things go. But I think those are all new platforms and big fans of what they're doing.
Yeah. It's funny, like, because I didn't really approach this as a case study, but I know the first half we did kind of a case study. Usually in case studies, the first thing I ask is what was your goal with the release, in a sense?
Yeah.
And kind of, and do you feel like so what was your intended goal? And usually, and I'd be remiss in not saying money, career, change the world, audience. Like, pick one of those.
Yeah. Honestly, earlier on, the goal was like, can we just get it into theaters? Like that felt super impossible to us. Is like just like Baron had never made a film. Like he'd been making TikToks on his iPhone. So we're like, if we can make a film and somehow convince theaters to actually let us in, like, um, we thought that would be the hardest part. And then it quickly became like money. Like, can we actually like prove that this is like, actually financially viable? Because if we can get the economics right, then we can actually build a blueprint and start to actually build out the Y Combinator method where we can actually start doing this at scale. And can we build a new path for creators and filmmakers? Um, so it was like get into theaters and then prove that this can be done again. And then, hopefully keep going from there and iterating was, I think, the biggest thing. And then um, also I think like really kind of carving out space for creators and online filmmakers to be seen differently and maybe legitimized because I think a lot of what we ran into early on is like the idea of a creator is more influencer or it's trashier or a lot of exhibitors had come to us saying like, hey, we put maybe Dude Perfect in or like, they'd cite certain examples of creator adjacent movies that hadn't done well. And so I think there's a bad reputation in the space or a stigma. And so I think we wanted to also work on like developing that and legitimizing it as much as we could.
Right. Cool. Um, well, those are my questions, and I think and we've dealt with most of the audience questions. And how can people get in touch with you?
They can send us an email at I can put it in the chat. It's probably easier. Contact@creatorcamp.co. And then at Creator Camp on Instagram is the easiest way to follow along on everything that we're doing. Um,
All right, how many are you at Creator Camp right now?
on the film side of the business, there's like four of us doing like all the marketing, distribution, and film. And then we have like an agency and branded content side of the business that's maybe like 10 or 12 people now.
Right. And are you all based in Austin?
Almost everyone is, yeah, yeah. There's a few folks scattered around, and then like a lot of contractors that we work with, all over. But it was mostly like like I think it was like five of us for most of the whole film process, and that was like events person doing all of the logistics, marketing content team doing all the videos, graphics, and then it was a pretty scrappy and small team.
Right. So how many projects, there's a question just came up. How many projects do you have going now? Or how many, I guess, in how many feature projects, how many shorts, how many are in development?
Yeah,
Just
I'd
to
say
get a sense.
we're in a phase now where we're like talking to different partners on the capital side and thinking through like, who do we want to partner with to sort of figure out that scale and really just learning where different streams of income can come from. Like before all this, we didn't even know what a slate was. So
Hmm.
as you can imagine, there's a lot of education that can be done there. And I think for us, like we're in a phase of still continuing with Too Sleepy, but then also just like going back to the whiteboard and being like, what did we learn from this? Like, what do we actually disagree with that we first were really optimistic about? Um, and like how much of what we're doing is like this like audience first creator audience, like filmmaking, or how much of it is actually like we're just like a distributor and not too different from an A24, except we're different, just like using different economics and can use audience as a way to de-risk projects earlier on. So it's like I wouldn't call it like soul searching, but like actually really going back into the project and using that to inform what we want to fund next versus just like jumping right back in. So we're spending a lot of time just like thinking through our thesis and plotting that out. And I think we'll spend the next few months doing that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
But we
yeah.
almost did. We almost jumped back into like two features, and we were like, hold up, like we need to just be a bit more intentional about this. And it feels like things are happening fast. It feels like we're gonna lose momentum, and I think choosing to slow down will ultimately build a better foundation. But even as I say it, I'm like, yeah, I get we have nothing in development actually. We're just looking at things, and we're just talking to people and taking it slow.
Good, good. That makes a lot of sense. Cool.
Yeah.
Um, well, that's Richard. Any last questions or thoughts?
Uh, I think it's incredible what you've done and all you built and that you're not letting anything stop you and learning from everything you did. So I'm sure that great successes lie ahead for you and hope we can blaze the trail for many others.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
And I think it's, kind of a wonderful demystification that you've just done, because I think there's a lot of talk bandying about, as you mentioned earlier, this is the future of film and, creators going to take over everything. And, it's just, I don't think people realize how hard it is to be a creator and how hard the economics are of being a creator. And, that it's really, there's no real easy answer here, as far as the future, in what's the future of film in a sense. I mean, the only thing that I can really say is to really think about, and what you're doing is thinking about the audience, but not, thinking of how you can engage them in different ways and knowing that, you don't figuring out different solutions of how you can connect with them directly. So,
100%, yeah. And I think like while it is super challenging in early days where a lot of the infrastructure or ways to collect audiences with theaters like aren't fully built out, I think we're going to move towards more and more of that. And I think it will get easier and hopefully we can try to channel as much money into the space as possible and, help sort of get projects off the ground. Even if someone doesn't have the full, creator or project behind them, but they have an early start, I think we're open to helping develop those projects further as well. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting stuff on the horizon for everyone, regardless of if you're a creator or not.
yeah, cool. Right. Well, Richard, thank you very much. Max, thank you very much. Thank you both. Thank everyone for being here and really appreciate, I think we had, I think 120. Oh, there's a lot of hearts coming. So good. So we'll be posting this next week, and with a bit of a report, and but we'll also be posting it, obviously the video online. So feel free to share that with other people and tell them it's coming out, anyone who missed it. So um, thanks all very much and stay tuned.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John. Thank you,
Yep.
Richard. Take care. Bye.
Bye, guys.